Hey guys, tonight we are gliding into Venice, and not the glossy postcard version you might have seen on travel blogs. No, this is 18th century Venice, damp and dim, where the lagoon smells faintly of brine and sewage, and candle flames flicker against walls that are always just a little too wet. You're arriving here as Casanova, though of course you don't yet know you'll end up with that name whispered for centuries. The gondolier punts slowly through dark water, and you feel that sleepy rocking, the sound of the oar making lazy ripples. It's all very romantic until you notice the rats. Yes, Venice is gorgeous in a half-ruined way, but you probably won't survive this. Mosquitoes, plague memories still fresh, and let's not forget the fire hazard of every wooden house perched over open water. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is over there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The gondola nudges along the Grand Canal, which is more like a winding, watery main street than a river. Palaces line both sides, their marble facades streaked with centuries of dampness. You see peeling frescoes, laundry hung between windows, and the kind of casual grandeur that Venetians take for granted. You're stepping into a city that once dominated Mediterranean trade, but by the time you arrive it's coasting on nostalgia. Historians still argue whether 18th century Venice was in true decline or just in a comfortable after-party phase, but either way, it's quieter than the roaring days of empire. The smell of salt mixes with roasting chestnuts sold on a corner, and you catch the sound of masked laughter as another gondola passes, musicians balancing on its prow. This is your first impression, Venice as a stage set. Every bridge is an archway to another scene, every plaza a ready-made theater. You don't yet know that you'll spend your life slipping between those scenes like an actor who never quite leaves the stage. You disembark on a slippery stone step, boots already damp, cloak tugged against the breeze. Venice at night is lantern-lit but shadowy, the water reflecting flames like trembling gold. You hear the faint toll of bells from San Marco, a reminder that religion still pulses through every aspect of life here. But the bells don't chase away the sense of mischief. Masks are common even outside carnival season. Venetians adore anonymity, and you'll come to love it too. It's freeing, not having to be entirely yourself. You're a boy of privilege, yes, but Venice is no place for certainty. The city rests literally on thousands of wooden piles driven into the mud centuries ago, and locals joke that everything floats in one way or another, morals included. A quirky fact you'll learn: Venetians believed the piles had petrified underwater and would last forever, though modern engineers point out they only endure because the lagoon starves them of oxygen. So even the ground beneath your feet is a bit of a convenient illusion. The soundscape is what surprises you most. Gondoliers sing snatches of opera arias, the water slaps against stone, somewhere a dog barks, then goes quiet. And yet there's also a constant hush, as if the whole city is wrapped in a damp blanket. It's sleepy and tense at once, the perfect cradle for someone like you who will thrive on secrecy. By day, the city feels different. You walk narrow alleys where the sun barely reaches, laundry dripping above your head. The piazza of San Marco is broad and blindingly bright compared to those alleys, filled with pigeons that strut like they own the place. You tilt your head to admire the basilica's mosaics glittering with gold tesserae, and you realize that Venice's power may be fading, but its beauty remains intoxicating. You also notice the cafes, small tables outside where men sip coffee, a relatively new addiction imported from the Ottoman world. You'll end up spending a suspicious amount of time in such places, partly for the caffeine, mostly for the gossip. And gossip is the bloodstream of this city. Venetians thrive on secrets, scandals, and whispered plots. As a newcomer, or even as a native son, you're always half-performing. Did that masked woman smile at you because she knows you, or because she hopes you'll never find out who she is? That tension between intimacy and anonymity becomes the pulse of your existence. Even the architecture conspires in this performance. Bridges connect neighborhoods, but they're narrow, forcing strangers to brush shoulders. Palaces hide grand halls behind plain facades, so you never know if a shabby door leads to a crumbling courtyard or a marble-lined ballroom. The city loves to surprise. And you, eager and restless, begin to learn how to play along. Yet there's a practical side, too. Venice is expensive, and wealth is unevenly distributed. You see noble families maintaining their palaces while quietly selling off heirlooms, and fishermen hauling in meager catches. You sense opportunity, because where money is scarce, cleverness becomes its own currency. You file that away, though you're still just a boy clinging to your tutor's hand, trying not to slip on the mossy stones. One of your first lasting memories is of carnival masks in shop windows, Botta with their jutting jaws, Moretta round and mute, Zanny long-nosed and absurd. They're both comical and unsettling. And during carnival, which stretches for months, these masks allow everyone to mingle, nobles, merchants, servants, even foreigners. You'll soon discover that Venice thrives on blurred lines, where you can never be entirely sure if you're speaking to a duke or a dockhand. As you lie awake your first nights in Venice, lulled by the constant lapping of water against foundations, you feel both charmed and unsettled. The city seems alive, its canals breathing like veins. You don't yet know that you'll one day escape its prisons, seduce its daughters, and finally be cast out. For now, you're just one small figure entering a world that feels both infinite and claustrophobic, a labyrinth of water and stone that will shape everything you become. You grow up in Venice not as a blank slate, but as a child already marked by both privilege and uncertainty. Your family name carries weight. Your father, Gaetano Casanova, is a struggling actor. Your mother, Zenetta Ferrucci, a vivacious actress more interested in the stage than in raising children. The theater shadows your early life, but it also means instability. You spend much of your boyhood being handed from one guardian to another, sometimes loved, sometimes merely tolerated. The lagoon city may look like a floating paradise to outsiders, but you soon learn it's a place where even children must learn how to balance on shifting foundations. Your father dies when you are still very young, and your mother, ever restless, leaves you in the care of your grandmother, Marzia Baldissera. She's strict, practical, and perhaps the only stabilizing figure of your childhood. Historians still argue whether she nurtured you with true affection or simply managed you like another household responsibility. Either way, her presence shields you from the chaos of your mother's itinerant life. But there's a cost. You become hungry for approval, craving affection in ways that will echo throughout your adult years. Venice at this time is still rich in pageantry. As a child, you watch the annual Sposalizio del Mare, the grand ceremony where the Doge marries the sea by tossing a gold ring into the lagoon. You stand in the crowd, pressed between excited Venetians, your eyes fixed on the glittering barge and the solemn procession. It feels magical, and you believe for a moment that the city itself is alive, bound by sacred ritual. Later, you'll learn the ritual is mostly political theater, a reminder of power the Republic no longer truly holds. But for now, you're simply entranced, and you tuck the memory away with childlike awe. Schooling comes early and comes hard. You are sent first to convent schools, surrounded by stern nuns and the echo of prayers that blur together after a while. The rules feel rigid, and you chafe at confinement. Yet you also discover something. You have a quick mind, a knack for language, and an insatiable curiosity. You pore over Latin texts while secretly doodling in the margins. You hear sermons about morality. But outside the convent walls you notice the gondoliers flirting with laundry maids and the aristocrats gambling in secret salons. You start to see the gap between what is preached and what is practiced. There is loneliness, too. You're precocious, a boy who talks like an adult, and that doesn't win you many friends. Other children mock your seriousness, and you retreat into books. You devour history, philosophy, and stories of Rome and Greece, dreaming of becoming something greater than a Venetian orphan. You also learn to observe people closely, how they speak, how they lie, how they cover their insecurities. This habit, born of solitude, will later serve you better than any formal education. But Venice has its quirky side, even for children. One odd tidbit you encounter: some Venetian mothers still swear by old folk remedies like crocodile dung mixed with oil as a supposed sunscreen for babies. You laugh at the absurdity, but it reminds you that this glittering city remains half anchored in superstition. You tuck that knowledge away too. Humans are rarely rational, and sometimes nonsense holds more sway than science. Your grandmother insists you attend Mass regularly, and you do, but half your attention wanders to the art inside the churches. The ceilings painted with spirals of angels, the altarpieces shimmering with gold, the incense thick enough to choke you, these things stir your imagination more than the sermons. You begin to associate religion not with pure faith but with theater, with performance. Perhaps you even sense that everything in Venice, from politics to devotion, is a kind of stagecraft. Still, life isn't entirely bleak. There are moments of pure childhood wonder. You recall sneaking onto the Riva degli Schiavoni, watching merchant ships unload spices and silks, the air heavy with scents from faraway lands. You see Armenians, Greeks, Jews, Turks, all mingling in a marketplace that feels like a crossroads of the world. You absorb the sounds of multiple languages, and you realize communication itself is a kind of power. But beneath this cosmopolitan bustle lies fragility. Venice in the 18th century is no longer the commanding power it once was. The Ottomans are encroaching, trade is shrinking. Still, Venetians keep pretending, their masks firmly in place, their rituals unbroken. You, as a child, sense this contradiction, grandeur fading, but never admit it aloud. It seeps into you, the instinct to perform, to conceal, to survive through charm rather than brute strength. At night, lying in your bed at your grandmother's house, you listen to the lagoons lapping and imagine adventures. The wooden beams above you creak, and you wonder if the whole city might someday sink. You whisper to yourself little stories, sometimes of knights and crusaders, sometimes of clever tricksters who escape punishment with a wink. You don't know it yet, but you're rehearsing for the role of your life. And in these early years, you also begin to feel that Venice is not just a home but a mirror. Its splendor and decay, its mixture of order and indulgence, are exactly the contradictions that will define you. You are a boy who loses a father early, who rarely sees his mother, who craves affection yet hides loneliness behind wit. You're learning that survival here requires flexibility, a willingness to slip into roles. And so you practice, even if all you're doing is parroting Latin or bowing too deeply at church. One evening, walking home with your grandmother, you pause at a bridge and watch the reflections of lanterns on the water. You wonder whether the real city is the stone around you or the shimmering illusion beneath. That quiet thought, born in your boyhood, will never quite leave you. You're still young when you begin your university days, and already the pace feels unnatural. Most boys your age are worrying about childhood squabbles, but you're bundled into academic robes and sent to Padua to study. You can hardly keep up with the weight of books pressed into your arms, the scratch of quills on parchment, the constant smell of ink staining your hands. At only 12, you sit among older students who tower over you, their beards and booming laughter making you feel like a child in borrowed clothing. Yet in some ways you thrive. Philosophy lectures stir something in you, discussions of Aristotle and Epicurus, of the soul and the stars, of virtue and vice. You try to follow along as professors pace before dusty blackboards, chalk squeaking. But truth be told, you are often distracted. A pigeon landing outside the window suddenly fascinates you more than a debate on metaphysics. And when your peers whisper about tavern outings and card games, your ears perk up even faster. Historians still argue whether you were genuinely a prodigy, or simply a boy pushed too quickly into adult roles. What's clear is that Padua imprints itself on you. You begin experimenting with independence, walking through crowded markets, bargaining for cheap food, stealing glances at women who, unlike in your childhood, now notice you back. There's a thrilling sense of possibility here, and also danger, for you are far too young to understand limits. Your studies take odd turns. Medicine fascinates you, but so does law. You bounce from one subject to another, less out of discipline than curiosity. A quirky tidbit, you become oddly obsessed with the idea of bloodletting, not because you believe in its medical value but because you think it looks dramatic. You picture yourself as a physician someday, robes billowing, patients swooning at your confident instructions. Of course, your grasp of actual anatomy is patchy at best. University is less about education and more about environment. The taverns surrounding the campus become as important as lecture halls. Here you learn how to drink wine without coughing, how to smile at jokes you don't understand, how to bluff your way into sounding knowledgeable. You watch older students gamble, and although you promise yourself you'll avoid their ruinous habits, you feel the itch. Dice clatter across tables, coins stack and vanish, and your hands twitch as though they already know the motions. You're also confronted with the reality of class. Noble sons arrive in carriages, dressed in silks, while you shuffle in cheaper cloth. You envy them, but you also notice how easily they squander what they have. That envy curdles into ambition. You tell yourself that charm and wit might one day outpace birthright. And secretly you begin rehearsing lines, clever remarks, even bits of Latin poetry to drop casually in conversations. If knowledge doesn't win you a seat at the table, performance might. Your professors leave mixed impressions. Some drone endlessly, their voices dull as dripping water. Others inspire, their words painting vast universes of thought. One in particular introduces you to experimental science, showing how a magnet moves filings on a plate. The sight mesmerizes you. It feels like magic disguised as logic. You scribble notes furiously, though half your ink ends up smudged on your cuff. Still, you're restless. You sneak away from campus more often than you should, drawn to the city's entertainments. Padua is smaller than Venice, but its streets hum with students, merchants, and traveling performers. You find yourself watching puppet shows in the square, laughing along with children, then slipping into smoky taverns to eavesdrop on grown men discussing politics. You're too young for either world, caught in between, yet you soak up both like a sponge. Nights are the hardest. You lie awake in your rented room, listening to other students stumbling home drunk, their songs echoing off the stone walls. You clutch your blankets, wondering whether you belong here. You're bright, yes, but also lonely. The gap between your mind and your years is a chasm. That loneliness drives you to imagine futures. Will you be a scholar, a priest, a doctor, or something else entirely? And though you don't admit it, you crave admiration more than wisdom. When classmates praise you for reciting passages flawlessly, you glow. When they ignore you, you sulk. That hunger for validation grows stronger, shaping you in ways neither your professors nor your grandmother could predict. Even at this young stage, you begin to understand something crucial. Knowledge alone does not open doors. Connections, charm, timing, these matter more. You notice how some students, barely literate, still pass exams because their families wield influence. You start to think that perhaps studying philosophy is less about truth and more about ammunition, clever words to be fired off at the right time. And amid all this seriousness, you still find childish amusements. You and a fellow student once climb onto a roof to chase pigeons, nearly tumbling off in the process. The laughter sticks with you, a reminder that you're still a boy pretending at adulthood. Later, you'll polish that memory into a story, making it sound daring rather than foolish. As months pass, your reputation grows. Professors nod approvingly. Peers begin to acknowledge you. But you're also gaining a different reputation, curious, mischievous, perhaps unreliable. You're a boy caught between scholarship and mischief, and you're learning that the boundary is thin. By the time you leave Padua, you carry more than academic notes. You carry the sense that the world is vast, that identity is flexible, and that the line between knowledge and performance is blurred. These lessons will follow you, perhaps more than any lecture on Aristotle. And though you don't know it yet, you're already rehearsing for the slippery balancing act that will define your name for centuries. You drift from student life into the orbit of the clergy, which in Venice is less about holy calling and more about politics, performance, and subtle games of power. Your grandmother, ever practical, imagines that a career in the church will give you stability. Priests hold sway, after all, and the church offers both respectability and protection. You nod along obediently, but you're already sensing the contradiction, piety on the surface, indulgence just beneath. You begin as a minor cleric, shuffling through prayers you half believe in, your cassock brushing damp stone floors. At first, you try to fit the part, bowing reverently, muttering Latin phrases, standing still during long ceremonies while incense smothers the air. Yet you can't help noticing the little cracks. Priests who preach chastity linger too long at the elbows of widows. confessors who thunder against gambling slip dice into their sleeves. You, still a teenager, watch and file away these hypocrisies with quiet amusement. Historians still argue whether you were genuinely pious in those early years or merely playing along, but either way, the stage of religion becomes another rehearsal for you. Your duties include reading scripture aloud, assisting with services, and sometimes running errands for higher clergy. This means entering rooms where politics hums beneath the chants, where bishops discuss alliances and rivalries as casually as they discuss wine vintages. You stand silent in corners, absorbing every word. And you realize something: religion is as much about performance as theater, and you, child of actors, feel oddly at home in the ritual. But Venice never lets anyone forget its carnival heart. Even within church walls, there's a wink and a nod to worldly pleasures. A quirky tidbit: one convent is rumored to produce the best marzipan in the city, and parishioners attend services there less for salvation than for sweets. You laugh at this, and secretly you sympathize. If holiness comes wrapped in sugar, who's complaining? You spend evenings debating with other seminarians. They argue about grace and free will while you slip in jokes that make them laugh louder than they should. Your wit becomes your weapon, and you learn that cleverness draws more admiration than solemnity. Yet you also begin to test boundaries. You wander into neighborhoods you're not supposed to, watching masked figures disappear into gambling dens. You feel torn, half a priest in training, half a boy hungry for mischief. Venice, meanwhile, surrounds you with temptation. Walking through its streets, you pass shops selling fine silks, perfumes imported from the East, and masks painted with delicate flourishes. The lagoon glitters under moonlight, gondolas rocking gently, couples leaning too close in the shadows. You try to convince yourself that you're immune, but you're not. You feel the pull of desire everywhere, disguised in perfume and candlelight. Your first true test comes when you assist a priest who is more indulgent than holy. He tutors you in ritual but also whispers confidences he should not. You catch him winking at women in the pews, you overhear him arranging secret visits. At first you're shocked, then you're entertained, and eventually you're complicit. He is supposed to model virtue, but instead he teaches you the art of double life, how to look saintly while living otherwise. One night, after a long service, you find yourself alone in the sacristy, staring at golden chalices. You wonder whether they symbolize faith or simply wealth. You imagine yourself someday in a higher position, perhaps even a bishop, robes heavy with embroidery. But you also feel restless, like you're trying to wear clothes that don't quite fit. You mutter a prayer, then smirk at how hollow it sounds on your lips. Historians still argue whether you ever truly believed in God or if faith was just another mask. Perhaps the truth lies in between, that you believed sometimes, doubted often, and performed always. What you do know is that your time in clerical robes teaches you how to play roles convincingly. That lesson will stay with you far longer than any sermon. And yet, despite all this seriousness, there's humor too. You once trip on your cassock while carrying candles, nearly setting the hem on fire. The congregation gasps. You grin sheepishly. The priest scolds you afterward, though you can tell he's trying not to laugh. It's a reminder that even within solemn rituals, comedy lurks. Your evenings become a tug-of-war. Some nights you pore over theology, trying to wrap your head around the mysteries of grace. Other nights you slip out, wandering into Venice's twisting alleys, following music and laughter. You learn that confession is a two-way street. The priest hears sins, but he also carries his own. And you, ever observant, begin to see morality less as a rulebook and more as a stage script everyone edits on the fly. By the time you finish your early clerical years, you've gained more than knowledge of Scripture. You've gained a skill for duplicity, for balancing appearances with desires. You can stand straight in robes one moment and lean conspiratorially toward a gambler the next. You may not know yet what path you'll follow, but you sense already that you will never fit neatly into sainthood. Instead, you're drawn toward the in-between spaces, where rules bend, where masks slip, where charm opens doors faster than prayer. The first time you step into the Venetian carnival at full tilt, you feel as though the entire city has slipped off its skin. Masks everywhere, lanterns swaying above crowded piazzas, musicians blasting out tunes with more energy than precision. The air smells of roasted chestnuts, spilled wine, and the faint salt of the lagoon. For a boy, or perhaps already a young man in training, this is less a festival and more an invitation to dissolve into chaos. The anonymity is intoxicating. You slip on a mask yourself, the stiff paper pressing against your face, the eye holes narrowing your vision into a private stage. Suddenly, no one knows if you are noble or beggar, priest or rogue. The barrier between classes melts faster than wax in summer. You push through the crowd, bumping elbows with strangers who laugh too loudly and tug your sleeve toward another dance. Historians still argue whether Carnival truly leveled the playing field or if it only pretended to while nobles still pulled strings from behind the curtains. But in that moment, it feels like freedom. Music follows you wherever you go. A violinist screeches out a tune near a bridge, drums pound in rhythm with your heartbeat, singers croon bawdy verses about fishmongers and lovers. You join in, half singing, half laughing, your voice muffled behind the mask. The whole city becomes a theater, and every alleyway another scene waiting for you. Lanterns cast strange shadows, making the masks look both comic and sinister. You see a bottom mask with its jutting jaw grinning at you, a biretta worn by a silent woman whose eyes say more than her lips ever could, and a grotesque zany nose wobbling comically as the wearer gestures dramatically. You realize that Venice has perfected a peculiar trick. It makes deception into entertainment. And you, ever observant, begin practicing the same trick yourself. You drift into a square where a troupe of street performers acts out a skit. The crowd roars with laughter as a mock priest chases a mock courtesan, both of them leaping clumsily across the stage. You laugh too, partly at the act, partly at the audacity. You glance at a real priest nearby and catch his strained smile, scandalized but unable to resist. It strikes you how Carnival allows everyone to laugh at authority, if only for a night. A quirky tidbit you'll never forget: Carnival season in Venice isn't a single week of revelry but stretches for months. From December through Lent, the city remains in costume. You think to yourself that this is less a holiday and more a way of life, a mask stretched across the entire winter. By the end of it, people are half drunk, half exhausted, but unwilling to stop. You, naturally, thrive in this suspended world where rules blur. Amid the noise and spectacle, you catch glimpses of intimacy. Lovers slip into alleys, whispering behind their masks. Gambling tables sprout like mushrooms, coins clattering, dice rolling, fortunes vanishing in seconds. You linger, watching carefully, studying the sleight of hand, the subtle tricks. You can't resist joining in. At first you lose more than you win, your hands clumsy with the dice. But you also notice patterns, cadences, little tells in the eyes of the players. You tuck those lessons away for later. Even food tastes different during Carnival. You munch fried fritters dusted with sugar, the grease staining your fingers. You sip hot wine spiced with cinnamon, warming your throat as the cold lagoon breeze nips at your ears. These little pleasures stick with you almost as much as the grand spectacles. Venice teaches you that indulgence doesn't always mean grand banquets. It can be something as simple as warm fritters at midnight under a lantern's glow. But Carnival also reveals darker undercurrents. Masks make it easy to hide not just identity but intention. You hear of pickpockets slicing purses, of clandestine trysts ending in scandal, of arguments escalating into knife fights by the canals. You keep your distance, but you feel the thrill of danger in the air. Carnival, you realize, is not simply about joy, it's about testing limits. Everyone walks the edge, and sometimes they fall. One evening you find yourself on the piazzetta near the Doge's palace, watching fireworks burst above the lagoon. The reflections shimmer across the water, masking the city in rippling gold. For a moment you forget everything, your clerical robes, your family, your studies, and simply exist as a flicker in the crowd. The anonymity feels like liberation, but also a little like erasure. Without your name, who are you? A mask with a heartbeat. That question will haunt you longer than you expect. And yet you laugh. You drink, you stumble, you flirt, you make jokes that sound sharper through the echo of music. You're learning how to slip in and out of identities, how to charm strangers without revealing much at all. This is Carnival's true lesson. You don't need to be someone fixed. You can be whoever the moment demands. As dawn creeps in, the masks come off. Some people groan, others cheer, many simply collapse where they stand. You tug your mask away and feel the cold morning air sting your face. You're tired, exhilarated, and changed. The city around you looks different now, quieter, as though it too is recovering from its long night. You shuffle home, pockets lighter, head buzzing, certain that you've discovered a secret. Venice itself is just one long carnival, and survival means learning which mask to wear. Morning in Venice doesn't exactly reward late risers, but you're hardly awake at dawn after nights of masks and music. Still, you make your way down narrow alleys toward the school where you're supposed to be learning Latin declensions and moral theology. The bells clang overhead, and your feet slap the stones that are still damp from the lagoon's mist. You arrive with ink stains on your fingers and the faint scent of last night's spiced wine clinging to your cloak. The classroom is a mix of stale air, parchment dust, and a dozen boys trying to look solemn while suppressing yawns. The Jesuit masters are sharp-eyed, quick with reprimands, and tireless in drilling you on grammar. You open your mouth to recite lines of Cicero but find your voice rough, the words tumbling clumsily as if even Latin has decided to mock you. The others smirk, and you smirk back, because while they might beat you at conjugations, you can already beat them at storytelling. Historians still argue whether you were truly a star pupil or merely one of many clever boys who coasted on wit. Either way, you learn to play to the audience. If your declension is shaky, you mask it with a flourish of delivery. If your memory fails, you insert a joke and turn error into entertainment. That habit, the quick joke to cover weakness, sticks with you for life. Discipline is constant. A misstep, a laugh too loud, or a scribbled note during prayers earns a crack across the knuckles. You hiss at the sting but pretend it doesn't bother you, biting back a grin. The masters want silence. You thrive in noise. You know even then that rules are not iron. They are simply a stage upon which to improvise. A quirky tidbit comes to you one afternoon. One master insists that holding your quill at a sharper angle improves both handwriting and moral character. He strides the rows, barking, "Virtue in the wrist!" You can barely keep from laughing, but you straighten the quill anyway. Later, you copy the lesson into your memory, not for better penmanship but for better comedy. Outside of classes, you study on your own terms. You pore over romances, Italian verse, even medical treatises you borrow from sympathetic clerics. You want to know everything, not just theology. One dusty volume describes ancient cosmetics used in Rome, including a bizarre recipe involving powdered crocodile dung as sunscreen. You can't help but imagine Venice's noblewomen smearing it on their powdered faces. You stifle a laugh in the silence of the library, already rehearsing how you'll retell this tidbit later at a dinner table. Sometimes, though, the education feels suffocating. You're surrounded by rules. No talking after prayers, no books without approval, no wandering the city after dusk. You break them, of course. Sneaking out at night becomes a small sport, the thrill of tiptoeing past stern-faced priests more exciting than any conjugation of amo, amas, amat. Each time you succeed, you feel a surge of triumph, learning, in your own way, that life's best lessons rarely happen in the classroom. Yet you're not immune to the pressure. One evening you sit with a grammar book open, candle burning low, eyelids heavy. The words blur. You think of Carnival's chaos and compare it to this cramped desk, and you wonder which life is meant for you, cloistered scholar or wandering trickster. The truth, though you don't yet know it, is that you'll never have to choose fully. You'll steal pieces from both. The Jesuits, for their part, shape you in ways you don't resist. They hammer into you a love for rhetoric, for the rhythm of a well-balanced sentence, for the pleasure of debate. They make you duel not with swords but with arguments, and you discover you like the clash of ideas. You even pick up some of their tricks: how to look pious while scheming, how to appear humble while hiding pride, how to use silence as much as words. Sometimes Venice itself intrudes into your studies. From the classroom window you glimpse gondolas sliding along the canals, hear vendors shouting, and smell fish being unloaded from the morning boats. You wonder how any boy is supposed to keep his mind on Cicero when outside the city is practically singing. You scribble verses in the margins, doodle masks and gondolas where Latin exercises should be. You know it's risky, but your restless hand can't stop. One day, a priest catches you half asleep, head on your desk, drooling onto parchment. He shakes you awake with a glare so fierce you expect lightning. Instead, he mutters about wasted potential and orders you to copy psalms until your hand cramps. You do it, grumbling, but you also memorize the priest's gestures, his huffing, the little twitch of his eyebrow. Later you imitate him for classmates, and win a round of stifled laughter. That's when you realize something: every authority figure is also material. But not all is rebellion. Sometimes you feel genuine awe. A lecture on astronomy opens your imagination to vast, starry realms. A lesson on theology sparks questions that even your teachers cannot answer. You sit there, jaw slack, wondering if perhaps the entire universe is simply another mask, God's grand carnival. The thought both excites and unsettles you. By the time you leave the school each day, your head aches with declensions, but your imagination races with ideas. You've learned that knowledge is power, but only if you can spin it, twist it, and use it at the right moment. You carry your books under your arm, ink smudges on your cuffs, mind buzzing with fragments of Cicero, Ovid, and absurd cosmetic recipes. You know the Jesuits want you to be a good scholar, maybe even a priest. You know, deep down, you're preparing for something else entirely. And so you wander home through the Venetian streets, listening to gondoliers singing, smelling the bakeries pulling warm loaves from their ovens, and thinking less about grammar and more about how to charm the world. Education, you realize, is less about rules and more about rehearsal. And you, without even trying, are rehearsing for a stage far bigger than any classroom. Your formal schooling is one thing, but Venice itself is the truer classroom, and you know it. The city is a perpetual performance, and masks are not just carnival costumes, they are daily tools. You slip one on during the festival, and suddenly you are not a gawky student with ink-stained fingers but a mysterious figure, anonymous yet dazzling. The mask frees you, and the city itself becomes your accomplice. The narrow alleys are alive with music, laughter, and scents of roasted chestnuts, and you push into the thick of it. You are swept along with nobles disguised as peasants, peasants disguised as nobles, and foreigners straining to guess who is who. A lute strikes up from a balcony, and a troupe of masked dancers passes, trailing ribbons. You realize with a kind of giddy clarity that the mask is not just fabric, it's permission. Historians still argue whether Venetian Carnival was primarily an instrument of political control or an authentic explosion of freedom. Either way, you treat it as your rehearsal stage. You learn to bow with elegance, to whisper jokes into a stranger's ear, to catch eyes across the crowd and hold them a beat too long. It is intoxicating, and for the first time you feel the weight of your own charisma. You practice small tricks, slipping between groups unnoticed, adopting a new accent, offering a clever remark that makes people laugh even though they cannot see your face. At first, it feels like a game. Later, it feels like destiny. You're not just hiding, you're inventing yourself. An invention is addictive. A quirky tidbit you discover: some masks are designed with little protruding noses that double as pockets for sweets or scented herbs. You try one, tucking candied violets inside, nibbling them as you stroll, all while appearing impossibly enigmatic. You laugh at the absurdity. Snacking in public while no one can see your chewing face feels like a private rebellion disguised as sophistication. There's a thrill in transgression, too. Behind the anonymity, you brush shoulders with women who would never look twice at you if they saw your bare, adolescent features. You flirt shamelessly, unburdened by the risk of recognition. You whisper outrageous lines, and when someone laughs or fans herself coyly, you feel the jolt of victory. Even if they never learn your name, you've tasted what it means to charm. Sometimes you ditch the schoolbooks entirely, racing into the night where lanterns glow on the canals. A masked ball in a palazzo blazes with chandeliers, and though you are technically not invited, you slip inside behind a cluster of nobles. The marble floors gleam, powdered wigs bob to the rhythm of violins, and trays of marzipan and spiced wine circle the room. You take one glass, then two, until your head spins. You tell yourself this is education, too, less Cicero, more improvisation. Of course, danger is part of the lesson. Venice polices its revelers carefully, and curfews exist even during carnival. If you're caught unmasked after dark, fines are steep. One night you sprint through alleys, cloak flying, pursued by guards with lanterns. You duck into a doorway, heart pounding, mask pressed to your face. They pass, cursing, and you breathe a silent laugh of triumph. The chase makes the game sweeter. In quieter moments, you notice how masks change people. A merchant who haggled you fiercely by day sings bawdy songs by night, face hidden. A noble who walked stiff-backed in daylight now dances barefoot in a square, his powdered wig discarded. The city sheds its hierarchy, at least temporarily, and you understand something vital. People will do anything if they think no one knows them. You file that observation away, knowing it will serve you later. The mask even changes how you see yourself. You look into a polished brass plate at a stall, see your hidden face staring back, and realize you are whoever you decide to be. Scholar? Trickster? Lover? All options. For a boy who grew up under the stern eyes of priests, this is liberation. You feel taller, bolder, cleverer. And you know, deep in your bones, that life is going to reward this daring. Historians will debate whether you exaggerated your carnival escapades, whether you truly slipped into palaces or merely dreamed about it. But in your own telling, it is already real. You've practiced charm on strangers, played with identities, flirted across divides of class, and discovered the wild joy of being more than just yourself. By the time dawn creeps across the lagoon, you stagger home with sore feet, faint perfume clinging to your cloak, and sugar crystals stuck to your lips from stolen sweets. You peel off the mask, stare at your own face in the weak light, and chuckle. You already know you will wear another tomorrow. Venice will never stop handing you stages, and you will never stop playing roles. Morning light leaks through cracked shutters, and your temples throb with the aftershocks of wine and dancing. You are young, resilient, and reckless, but even you know you cannot glide through life on charm alone. At least not yet. So you stagger into your formal lessons, where your Jesuit instructors insist on discipline, Latin recitations, and Euclidean proofs that blur together like meaningless chalk dust. You sit straight-backed, lips moving dutifully, but your mind drifts to the masked faces from last night. You begin to live in two worlds. By day, you are a student of theology, philosophy, and mathematics. By night, you are a masked reveler, already half in love with the idea of being someone else. Your teachers, sharp-eyed and unsparing, sense the division in you. One scolds you for ink stains and inattentive answers. Another praises your memory, claiming you have the makings of a fine scholar. Both are right, and both are wrong. Historians still argue whether your early education was truly rigorous or more like a patchwork of cramming and improvisation. You certainly learn a great deal. Latin so fluid you can pun in it, philosophy sharp enough to impress anyone at a dinner table. But you also cultivate the art of bluffing, of sounding like you know more than you do. That, you soon discover, is a more useful survival skill than solving geometry problems. A quirky detail of Venetian schooling: some boys carry little scented pomanders to hold beneath their noses during long classes, a defense against the foul air of crowded rooms. You try one once, filled with crushed rosemary and orange peel, and find it distracts you from your boredom more than from the smell. You fiddle with it under the desk until the master snatches it away. Lesson learned: never make your props too obvious. The balancing act wears on you. There are nights when you vow to study harder, to rise through the church, maybe even secure a respectable position. And then there are nights when a violin's note drifts across a canal, or a girl's masked eyes meet yours, and all resolutions melt. You tell yourself you can do both, that you can chase knowledge and pleasure with equal vigor. But already the cracks are forming. You begin to collect stories like trophies. One day, you outwit an older student in debate by twisting his words until he sputters red-faced. Another day, you gamble away your meager allowance, then win it back with a clever trick of cards. You store these incidents in your memory, rehearsing them as if you're already preparing for an audience. You suspect your life will be measured not in grades but in anecdotes. Even the city conspires to distract you. A boatman waves you aboard for free, just to hear your latest joke. A baker slips you an extra roll because you once recited a bawdy verse that made him wheeze with laughter. You realize your charm has currency, more immediate than coins. Where lessons are abstract, human reaction is tangible. You weigh the two against each other, and slowly, charm begins to win. Still, the classroom has its moments of revelation. A lecture on astronomy leaves you staring at the night sky differently, feeling a tremor of awe. A discourse on ethics challenges you. Do you believe what you recite, or are you only playing along? You toy with both answers, uncertain. You will never be free of the church's imprint, yet you will also never be contained by it. You live in the tension between obedience and rebellion, and somehow that becomes your signature style. There is also the constant push of family expectations. Your grandmother's voice echoes whenever you falter, reminding you to seize opportunity, to make something of yourself. You swear you will. But how? Scholar, priest, gambler, lover, you are still choosing, still rehearsing. Every mask you put on feels like a trial run for the role you haven't quite settled on. One late night, exhausted from study, you wander outside and find yourself on a quiet bridge. The lagoon ripples under starlight, and you lean on the stone rail, breathing in the damp air. For a moment you glimpse the whole of your life stretched before you, not in detail, but in sensation, restless nights, stolen kisses, dangerous gambles, dazzling escapes. You don't know yet that you will live it all, but the taste is already there. By dawn, you are back at your desk, eyes heavy, scratching Latin verbs onto parchment. You may be failing the neat dichotomy your teachers imagine, scholar by day, sinner by night, but you are succeeding at something subtler. You are learning to juggle identities, to switch faces as easily as masks. It is not stable, but it is dazzling. And even at this age, you suspect stability is overrated. You wake to the sound of hammers and shouting. Venice is noisy even at its best, but today it is something else entirely. Across the city, scaffolds rise, musicians tune, cooks stir cauldrons big enough to feed a regiment. It is carnival season, and suddenly you are not just a distracted student or an aspiring priest. You are a small figure caught inside a roaring, glittering machine of celebration. Masks spill into the streets before noon. Some are simple black half masks, concealing the upper face. Others are elaborate constructions of feathers, velvet, and gilded leather. You slip one on, marveling at how instantly you become anonymous, even dangerous. Behind a mask, you can wink at a senator's wife or steal a sweet from a merchant's stall. No one can say it was you. That anonymity is intoxicating. Carnival is more than mischief, it is theater. Streets become stages, balconies become boxes, and everyone plays a role. Historians still argue whether Venetian carnival began as a practical safety valve for a tightly controlled society or as a decadent indulgence pushed to excess. You don't care about the origins. You only care about the freedom. The city loosens its belt, and for a brief span, even someone like you can pretend to be a prince. You notice the food stalls first, fritters dusted with sugar, roasted chestnuts, hot wines spiced with cinnamon. The air is thick with frying oil and incense, both sacred and profane clashing together. A quirky detail: some vendors even sell hollow eggshells filled with perfumed water, used for playful tossing. You buy a few and quickly discover that hitting a passing stranger with a splash of rosewater earns laughter rather than outrage. It is the only time in your life when pelting people with liquids is considered charming. Music follows you everywhere. On one corner, fiddlers saw frantically at strings while a man stamps out the rhythm with his boots. On another, a small group of masked singers performs a comic song about corrupt priests, something that would get them in trouble any other month of the year. You clap along, delighted, secretly noting which jokes get the biggest laughs. You already see comedy as a weapon, a way to tilt a crowd in your favor. By nightfall, the city blazes with lanterns strung from palaces to gondolas. You drift through the crowd, your mask sweaty against your face, yet you cannot bring yourself to remove it. Every glance you exchange feels sharpened, mysterious. A masked woman brushes past, her perfume lingering, her hand grazing yours. You don't see her face, but you remember the touch for years. At the height of Carnival, the Piazza San Marco becomes a madhouse of spectacle. Fire eaters perform beside acrobats, mock duels break out in the square, and courtesans parade with fans flicking open like secret codes. You shove your way through, exhilarated, unsure whether you are participating or merely observing. You realize that Carnival is both. You are actor and audience, trickster and target. You end up in a smaller courtyard where a puppet show is underway. The story is crude, a greedy merchant, a clever maid, but the audience roars with laughter. You laugh too, realizing how much joy comes from exaggeration, from turning real flaws into theatrical farce. That, you suspect, is the seed of your own storytelling. Later in life, you will inflate your escapades until they sparkle, just like these puppets inflate human folly. Historians still argue whether Carnival made Venice freer or simply distracted people from its rigid politics. You feel the tug of both. Beneath the masks and music, you sense the strict laws waiting to return when the festival ends. But for now, you allow yourself the luxury of suspension. You can be a scholar, a rogue, a lover, or all three in the same night. And no one demands consistency. Toward dawn, when lanterns burn low and musicians slump over their instruments, you find yourself wandering along the Grand Canal. Gondolas bump together like tired animals, and the water reflects fragments of light. You are drunk, but not only from wine, you are drunk on possibility. If Venice can transform itself so utterly for a season, perhaps you can too. Perhaps you can wear any mask long enough that it becomes your face. By the time you return to your quarters, exhausted and still in costume, the first sunlight seeps into the sky. You collapse onto your bed, clutching the mask in your hand. It smells of sweat, perfume, and candle smoke. It smells like freedom. Morning comes too quickly, dragging with it the sound of church bells that seem louder than usual. You groan, rub your eyes, and remember that you are not just any young man in Venice. You are supposed to be training for the priesthood. The irony is not lost on you. Last night you wore a mask and hurled rosewater eggs at strangers, and this morning you are expected to chant psalms in a steady voice as though nothing happened. Welcome to the paradox of your life. Your early years in the seminary are filled with ritual. You rise with the bells, shuffle into the chapel, and join the other students in endless litanies. The words spill out of your mouth, but your mind is often elsewhere, wondering how the gondoliers outside are managing to laugh so loudly, or whether the carnival mask you tucked under your bed still smells faintly of perfume. Still, you play your role. The cassock is scratchy, the collar too tight, but the costume is familiar, like another mask you have learned to wear. Discipline is the official currency here, though not everyone is wealthy in it. Some students cling fiercely to devotion, others are sly, slipping coins under the table to avoid tedious duties. You quickly discover that charm is just as valuable as obedience. You smile at the right moments, tell harmless jokes when superiors are near, and suddenly your minor mistakes are overlooked. Historians still argue whether seminaries in Venice were meant to produce true men of faith or simply obedient citizens cloaked in piety. You suspect it's the latter. A mainstream fact, Latin is drilled into you every day. The Church insists it is the holy language, eternal and unchanging. Yet you also hear Venetian dialects echoing through the dormitories, earthy and sharp, carrying gossip about who snuck wine into their chambers or who has been caught sneaking glances at noble ladies during processions. Latin might be the language of God, but Venetian is the language of mischief, and you grow fluent in both. There are small pleasures to be found. The bread at breakfast is warm when you're lucky, the library smells of dust and secrets, and on rainy afternoons you sometimes manage to lose yourself in a forbidden novel tucked behind a theological tome. A quirky detail: one of your classmates insists that rubbing a clove of garlic on the soles of his feet prevents illness, and he does it religiously. The dormitory smells like a soup kitchen whenever he takes off his shoes. Not all the lessons are spiritual. You are taught to read people as carefully as you read scripture. Watch the bishop's face, and you can tell when he is weary enough to overlook mistakes. Watch a fellow student's posture, and you'll know if he's hiding contraband. These observations stick with you far more than any lecture on Augustine or Aquinas. In time, you realize you are practicing the very arts of persuasion and performance that will carry you far beyond the church walls. At night, lying on your thin mattress, you drift between piety and temptation. You think about the sermons on sin, about fire and brimstone, and then your mind wanders to the masked woman whose hand brushed yours during carnival. You scold yourself, promise to focus, and then promptly dream of lace fans and whispered laughter. Historians still argue whether young seminarians like you genuinely struggled with faith or simply tolerated it until something better came along. In your case, tolerance is about all you can manage. You become aware of hypocrisy early. Priests who preach poverty dine on rich stews. Monks who warn against lust gaze a little too long at passing beauties. You file these observations away like notes in a ledger. If the men of God cannot follow their own rules, why should you feel crushed beneath them? This seed of skepticism sprouts slowly, watered by every contradiction you witness. And yet there are moments when the chapel does move you. Candlelight flickering against gilt altarpieces, voices rising together in harmony. It can be enough to make you forget your doubts for a breath or two. You feel a shiver then, as if you are part of something larger, though the feeling never lasts long. Faith slips away as quickly as it comes, like water through cupped hands. The routine of seminary life is monotonous, but you endure it, because you sense that endurance itself is part of the game. If you can play this role convincingly enough, you will earn respectability, perhaps a patron, perhaps a better chance to carve out your future. Every sermon you memorize, every confession you rehearse, every bow you perfect is not wasted, it is practice. For what exactly, you don't yet know, but deep inside you suspect your life will not end in a pulpit. For now, though, you keep your head down. You recite the prayers, polish the chalice, and nod when your instructors speak. But when night falls, you tuck the carnival mask deeper under your bed, a silent promise to yourself that the play has only just begun. If the seminary is a world of order and ritual, Venice outside its gates is chaos wrapped in silk. You walk the narrow streets after lessons, breathing in the smells of brine, roasting chestnuts, and candle wax melting in 100 shrines. Life in the city is loud, colorful, and endlessly theatrical. You cannot help but compare it to the gray corridors of your schooling, where piety is demanded but rarely felt. Markets hum with activity. You push past baskets of figs, bolts of velvet, cages of squawking hens, and the occasional fortune-teller promising to read the stars for a copper coin. A gondolier belts out a bawdy tune, and you grin, half wishing you could join in. Everyday Venetian life is not glamorous, but it is never dull. A mainstream fact, Venice's economy at this time is strained by wars and shifting trade routes, but to you, the city still feels like the center of the universe, balanced precariously on its lagoon. Neighbors squabble from balconies, tossing insults that sound like poetry, while children splash in puddles left by high tide. You notice how the city itself seems alive, creaking bridges, dripping alleyways, even the pigeons strutting like minor nobles across St. Mark's Square. For you, every corner offers a new distraction, another chance to watch people and practice your growing skill at reading them. A quirky tidbit drifts your way when you overhear two merchants argue about whether drinking from a lead-lined cup makes wine taste better. One swears it gives the flavor more weight. The other coughs into his sleeve and mutters that it is slowly poisoning them all. You tuck the debate away in your mind as one of those strange contradictions this city loves to nurture. Historians still argue whether Venetians at large truly understood the dangers of lead, or if they simply ignored the risks for the sake of fashion and convenience. At mealtime, you slip into taverns crowded with sailors and apprentices. The air is thick with garlic, pepper, and spilled ale. You nurse a small drink, you cannot afford more, and listen to the chatter. News from Constantinople, gossip about noble families, complaints about taxes. You learn more in an hour at a tavern than in a week of lectures. And if you smile at the innkeeper's daughter, well, that is education too. Domestic life around you is just as fascinating. Women beat laundry against wooden platforms, their arms strong and their laughter sharp. Men carry water jugs, their backs bent, but still pause to flirt in passing. You notice how survival is laced with theater, Even in their struggles, Venetians keep up appearances, as though every errand is part of a stage play. Yet the city is not without its shadows. You pass beggars clustered near church steps, faces lined with salt and sun. You hear whispers about plague outbreaks in distant quarters. You watch officials patrol with a kind of heavy indifference, more interested in bribes than justice. Venice is a jewel, but one set in tarnished metal. That realization unsettles you, even as it thrills you, the sense that life here is both fragile and resilient, forever teetering between splendor and decay. Sometimes you sneak into the homes of wealthier patrons under the guise of errands. The contrast is staggering: frescoed ceilings, gilt mirrors, trays of sugared almonds. You marvel at their abundance but also notice the petty complaints, how one lady curses her lace shipment arriving late from France. You begin to suspect that poverty makes people more inventive while wealth makes them more restless. Walking home at night, lantern light quivers across the canals. You hear footsteps echo, a door slam, a whispered bargain made in an alley. Venice after dark is a different city entirely, more secretive, more dangerous, but also more alluring. You pull your cloak tighter, but part of you relishes the uncertainty. Perhaps the city is training you, sharpening you, as surely as any classroom. And so you straddle both worlds: the orderly, cloistered life of the seminary and the messy, intoxicating rhythm of the streets. Each day you pretend to belong to one, but your heart beats faster in the other. The city sings, and you feel yourself slowly learning the tune. You might have thought the city's embrace would protect you forever, but Venice has sharp teeth hidden beneath its silks. The night you first sense their bite, you are walking home from a late gathering, the laughter of friends still ringing in your ears. Then you notice two men following, their cloaks too heavy for the season, their footsteps too perfectly paced with yours. You duck into an alley, pretending not to care, though your heart beats hard enough to shake your ribs. You are not wrong to be nervous. Venice has eyes everywhere: spies for the Council of 10, informers paid in ducats or favors, priests eager to report sins. The city's most terrifying power is not its wealth or beauty but its invisible grip, a government that knows what you say, what you drink, and whom you kiss. You soon learn how fragile your freedom really is. A mainstream fact: Venice's Inquisition worked in tandem with the state, often convening in secret rooms inside the Doge's palace, where even nobles trembled at a summons. Your own summons comes suddenly. A knock at the door, polite but cold. A letter sealed with wax, instructing you to appear. You read it twice, your mouth dry. What offense could they pin on you? You remember your careless laughter at a priest's expense, your fascination with alchemy powders, even the bawdy songs you hummed after carnival. Each seems harmless until you imagine them twisted in a report. A quirky tidbit surfaces from this ordeal. People often claimed the Venetian inquisitors listened through the mouths of carved stone lions, slotted statues scattered across the city where citizens could drop anonymous accusations. You once joked about those lions, calling them gossiping pets. Now you wonder if one has already swallowed your name. Historians still argue whether these lion mouths actually mattered or were merely symbolic. But in your mind they loom large, swallowing reputations whole. The chamber you enter is dim. Torches sputter against damp stone walls, casting nervous shadows. A long table waits, and behind it, masked faces, half obscured, half severe. They do not shout, they whisper, asking you to explain your studies, your associations, your indulgences. Their voices are calm, which makes the menace worse. You answer carefully, balancing honesty with charm, slipping in bits of flattery like breadcrumbs tossed to crows. At one point, one of the men produces a tiny vial of powder seized from your room. He asks if it is sorcery. You laugh softly, insisting it is nothing more than an experiment in preserving herbs. You spin a story about learning from respected physicians, hoping the blend of truth and invention convinces them. The silence afterward is thick as Venetian fog. Then, a moment of absurdity. As you speak, you notice one inquisitor stifling a sneeze, perhaps from the dust of your confiscated herbs. For a second, the chamber's menace wavers, replaced by the ridiculous image of authority undone by pollen. You tuck the detail away, because laughter, silent though it is, becomes your shield. When the questioning ends, they dismiss you with a gesture. You leave without chains, but you do not feel free. You know now that every word, every glance, can be weighed against you. Venice is still your playground, but it is also a trap, its waters reflecting not only stars but surveillance. Outside, the city seems changed. Lanterns feel like watchful eyes. Conversations sound like confessions. Yet part of you thrills at the danger. Life tastes sharper when it might be cut short. You imagine yourself outsmarting them, slipping between their nets, proving too quick, too charming to catch. And so, your education deepens, not in books, but in suspicion. You learn to watch the watchers, to smile while measuring how much you can reveal, and to keep secrets tucked under your tongue like sugar that never dissolves. Venice has placed you under its magnifying glass, and rather than shrink, you decide to gleam. You taste freedom like salt on the air the night you finally slip away, leaving behind the lions' mouths, the inquisitors, and the endless whispering canals. Venice fades behind you, its dome shrinking against the horizon as your boat creaks into the wider Adriatic. But though your body sails into exile, your heart still beats in Venetian rhythm, mask and melody, gamble and glance, all folded into your manner of walking, speaking, and smiling. You are now a wanderer, carrying home in your accent and debts in your pocket. The first streets you pace are in Paris, wide and bustling in a way Venice could never be. Horses clatter, gutters stink, taverns roar with laughter. Here, people have more space to breathe, but less poetry in their voices. You drift through cafes, ordering coffee that tastes both bitter and thrilling. Strange to think this new drink, so common now, was once exotic. You hear men debating philosophy in smoky corners, arguing whether reason alone can build a perfect society. A mainstream fact, this was the Paris of Enlightenment salons, where thinkers like Voltaire and Diderot scribbled ideas that would soon reshape Europe. You, of course, nod along as if you belong, though inside you are plotting your next card game. You do not linger. Dresden pulls you next, its Baroque palaces gleaming like sugar sculptures. There you learn how to bow properly, how to flatter without appearing insincere, how to ride the currents of aristocratic boredom. You gamble, you flirt, you spin tales of Venice, and people listen, because few things sound as romantic as a lagoon city where men wear masks by law and women wink from balconies. A quirky tidbit, you even convince a few that gondoliers sing constantly as they row, though in truth many simply grunt with the effort. You never correct their dreamy misunderstanding, it makes you more exotic. As you move from city to city, you learn that being a foreigner is a strange gift. You are both suspect and fascinating. People forgive your missteps because you are Venetian. They lean in closer when you describe Carnival. They laugh at your small jokes about senators. Historians still argue whether Venice's reputation in this era was declining or flourishing, but in drawing rooms abroad it remains pure magic, a shimmering myth, and you are its living emissary. But travel is not a holiday for you. It is survival. Money slips away like wine through cracked glass. Each time you win at cards, a week later you are broke again. Each time you charm a patron, another patron grows tired of you. You drift like a lute player who knows one song too well, charming at first, repetitive after a while. Nights stretch long on foreign beds. You dream of canals, of bells ringing across foggy mornings, of the damp smell of salt water rising from your floorboards back home. You wake to the chatter of strange languages, the clatter of coaches instead of the slap of oars. Even the food feels wrong, sausages instead of fish, ale instead of wine. You are everywhere welcome but nowhere at peace. And yet there is sweetness in wandering. You see libraries that dwarf anything Venice holds, palaces where ceilings seem to reach heaven, landscapes of rolling green instead of narrow water. You learn how other nations dress, pray, argue, and dine. You collect details the way others collect coins, stuffing them into your memory to polish later into stories. Every city is a mask you try on, though none fits as snugly as Venice's. In small towns, you are less careful. You boast too much, spend too freely, seduce too quickly. And so, you are chased, threatened, occasionally even smacked with a glove. Exile is not glamorous, it is itchy, like clothes that don't belong to you. Still, you keep moving. You have learned that if you stay too long in one place, debts catch up, rivals sharpen knives, and authorities begin to ask questions. Movement becomes your shield. To wander is to remain alive, even if it means you are perpetually half rootless, half hungry, half excited. One night, after too much wine in a smoky Dresden inn, you lean back and laugh with a group of strangers who barely know your name. For a moment, the laughter feels real. Perhaps this is what home means for you now, not a place, but the temporary warmth of company, quickly found and quickly left. And so you travel on, pockets light, heart restless, mind full of memories both gilded and shabby. Venice still glitters behind your eyes, but Europe spreads ahead like an endless card table, and you cannot resist the shuffle. Exile wears on you, but opportunity still beckons. Paris calls again, louder than the other cities, with promises of wealth and influence if only you can step carefully. You arrive not as a beggar this time but as a player on a greater stage. The salons sparkle, golden chandeliers, powdered wigs, fans fluttering like restless birds. Coffee and chocolate flow freely, both still luxury drinks, and every corner hums with clever conversation. You drift among the circles, laughing at philosophers, flirting with duchesses, hinting at secrets you probably don't have. For a moment, you almost convince yourself you belong here, at the very center of European wit. One mainstream fact: Paris in this period was the heartbeat of Enlightenment publishing, with encyclopedias being compiled that tried to capture all human knowledge between two covers. You, meanwhile, capture attention with anecdotes about Venetian masks and gondola trysts. Scholars wrestle with reason, and you wrestle with dice. It feels fitting. Then comes a strange twist. A wealthy woman takes an interest in you, not as a lover but as a confidant. She wants you to read to her in Italian, to translate sentimental verses, to make her laugh with your foreign perspective. It is almost wholesome, though you cannot help but flirt a little around the edges. A quirky tidbit, she introduces you to the fashionable fad of hot air balloon talk, though balloons aren't yet flying. People gossip about the possibility of humans taking to the skies, and you, naturally, insist you'd be the first Venetian to try. But Paris is as dangerous as it is dazzling. Behind the sparkle, debts accumulate. Your gambling grows reckless again. Cards pile, coins vanish. Soon creditors scowl, and whispers travel faster than applause. Historians still argue whether you were truly hunted by the police for fraud or whether you exaggerated the threat later in your memoirs, but either way, you felt the pressure mounting. You tried to reinvent yourself, slipping into different roles as if into different coats. One week you are a man of letters, haunting libraries and murmuring about philosophy. The next, you are an astrologer, telling fortunes with a flourish of the hand. Another time, you sell lottery schemes, promising investors a fortune if only they believe. These schemes wobble like card towers, impressive until they collapse. There are moments when you almost rise higher. A nobleman invites you to court. You stand in halls where marble glows, mirrors multiply the candlelight, and powdered courtiers watch you with polite suspicion. You bow, you charm, you improvise stories about Venetian senators with more confidence than truth. For a few evenings, you taste proximity to real power. But power in Paris is fickle. One wrong rumor, one unpaid debt, and you are tossed aside like last night's candle stub. So you slip away again, because slipping away is what you do best. Coaches creak under you, inns blur together, landscapes roll past in endless rhythm. France opens into Germany, into Switzerland, into places where your name means little and your accent means everything. You begin to realize that reinvention is not just a tactic but a necessity. If you cannot anchor yourself in Venice, you must become whatever mask each city requires: scholar, gambler, priest, lover, charlatan, friend. Yet through all this, you still carry the Venice of your youth inside you, like a glowing ember. In smoky taverns you tell stories of carnival, in drafty mansions you compare the canals to mirrors, in dark carriages you describe mass dances as if you still attend them nightly. Your audiences sigh, lean closer, and for a while you are the most interesting man in the room. But when the laughter fades and the crowd disperses, you walk back to your rented rooms alone. The mattress is lumpy, the air stale, the shutters thin against the cold. You pour yourself a little cheap wine, you count your remaining coins, you promise yourself that tomorrow will be luckier. Then you close your eyes and drift into dreams of bells over water, dreams that still smell faintly of the Adriatic. Exile is not freedom, not really. But it is a life, and you are determined to keep playing it like a game of chance, even if the cards are stacked against you. The road carries you north, through foggy forests, and into the lands of emperors. Vienna opens before you, stately and precise, the Habsburgs presiding like figures carved in marble. Here the music is everywhere. Mozart's notes curl through salons, fiddlers play in taverns, and even the church bells seem tuned for a symphony. You breathe it in, yet you are not here as a musician. You are here to survive, to charm, to once more sell the story of yourself. Vienna is neat, ordered, almost suffocating compared to Venice's chaos. The streets are swept, the soldiers drilled, the courtiers powdered and polite. But you slip into the scene like a splash of red wine on white silk. You flatter ministers, you gamble with officers, you flirt with countesses who carry fans more dangerous than swords. One mainstream fact: Vienna at this time was the heart of the Habsburg Empire, its imperial court dictating policy across Central Europe. You, of course, care less about geopolitics than about whether the kitchens serve pheasant or trout. You discover something amusing: Austrians have a taste for fortune-tellers. It doesn't take long before you reinvent yourself again, this time as an astrologer who can read stars as easily as cards. You draw elaborate charts, scribble mysterious signs, and murmur predictions with an air of authority. People pay handsomely to hear you tell them what they already want to believe. A quirky tidbit: you even claim that Saturn's position explains why one Baron's gout is particularly cruel in winter, and he nods as if you've unlocked the mysteries of the cosmos. Yet even here your reputation drifts ahead of you. Some whisper that you are a fraud, others that you are a spy, and a few that you are merely a rogue Venetian passing through. Historians still argue whether you truly had connections with secret networks in Vienna or whether you fabricated those tales later to make yourself seem more dangerous. Whatever the truth, suspicion circles you like wolves in the snow. Still, there are good nights. You dine by candlelight in vaulted halls, tapestries glowing in the firelight, silver dishes piled high with game. You make people laugh so hard wine spills on their embroidered cuffs. You tell stories of gondoliers, of masked carnivals, of prison escapes with such flourish that listeners swear they can see the canals in their minds. You trade warmth for coins, laughter for shelter, and in those moments you almost feel you belong. But Vienna is also cold in more ways than one. The winters bite hard, and so do the bills. Debts pile again, as debts always do. You dodge creditors, you move lodgings, you invent excuses with the same creativity you once reserved for love letters. Eventually, the game wears thin. The city that seemed like a new beginning becomes another cage, and you slip away once more before the walls close in. The road out is harsh, snow crunches underfoot, carriages rattle, in smell of smoke and cabbage. You dream of Venice again, though you no longer expect to see it. You are a wanderer, a mask without a fixed face. Cities blur into one another: Dresden, Prague, Leipzig, and in each you play your part. Sometimes adored, sometimes reviled, always moving. In the quieter moments, though, you begin to wonder what will remain of you. Are you the lover, the gambler, the spy, the storyteller? Or are you simply the sum of all these masks, a man defined by performance? You shake off the thought with a joke, as you always do. But it lingers, like the echo of a violin long after the bow has lifted. For now, though, you keep walking, because walking is what you know best. The next city waits, the next audience, the next hand of cards. Somewhere ahead, a new mask lies ready for you to wear. You drift back toward Italy, though not quite to Venice yet, and the air feels different, heavier, more familiar, like an old perfume clinging to a garment at the back of the wardrobe. By now you have lived so many roles: student, gambler, priest assistant, prisoner, astrologer, that meeting someone from your past feels like meeting a ghost of yourself. And yet, as fate arranges it, you begin stumbling into faces you once adored. The first encounter is almost comic. A woman you once wooed in your 20-something recklessness now greets you with a polite, almost maternal nod. She has children in tow, a husband with a paunch and powdered wig beside her, and you realize with a pang that the little glances she once saved only for you are now long gone. You bow, exchange pleasantries, pretend not to notice her faint embarrassment. Mainstream historical fact: many of Casanova's lovers later married into respectable Venetian or Italian households, their wild youth conveniently glossed over in family stories. You see it in her eyes, gratitude for the past, but also relief that it stayed in the past. Later, you meet another flame under stranger circumstances. She is widowed now, wearing sober black, but when she speaks you hear the same playful voice that once laughed with you behind velvet curtains. For an hour you feel transported back, as if no time has passed. But then the mood shifts. She tells you she remembers more pain than joy from those days, more jealousy than laughter. A quirky tidbit: she even brings up one of your miracle medicines, a powder you swore would make her sleep like a child, which in truth was just a pinch of sugar mixed with nutmeg. You cringe, then laugh, then cringe again. The hardest reunion, though, comes not with a woman but with her grown daughter. Yes, someone you had known when she was a girl is now a grown lady of society, and you catch yourself staring too long at the resemblance to her mother. She notices, smiles politely, but the weight of years presses down on you. Historians still argue whether Casanova truly kept all his tangled romances compartmentalized, or whether awkward overlaps like these haunted him more than he admitted. You, walking in these borrowed shoes, feel the embarrassment burn like hot wax. You try to mask the discomfort with wit. You regale friends with stories of past escapades, polishing them until they sparkle like jewels. The rooms laugh, but sometimes you notice one face in the crowd, an old flame, pursing her lips as if to say yes, but that's not quite how it happened. Memory, you realize, is as much invention as fact, and you are its most relentless fabricator. There are sweeter moments too. A gentle walk along an orchard, the scent of ripe figs, the shy hand of a woman who once swore she'd never see you again. In her company you find not passion but tenderness. You sit quietly, watching swallows dart through twilight, and for once you are not acting, not seducing, not gambling. Just being. Perhaps that is rarer than all the triumphs you ever boasted. And yet the tide keeps moving. Venice is changing, Italy is shifting, Europe itself hums with the stirrings of enlightenment. You are no longer the dashing mask of youth, you are the man behind it, a little softer in the jawline, a little heavier in step. But as you drift between these encounters, you realize something quietly profound. Every romance you once thought eternal has dissolved into memory, into story, into the faint outlines of who you are becoming. By the end of these reunions, you feel both warmed and hollowed. The city streets you walk are layered with ghosts. Each corner holds a whisper of someone you once kissed, someone you once angered, someone who once swore your name was carved in eternity. But eternity, it seems, has a short memory. You smile at the irony, adjust your coat, and keep walking. You settle back into Venice at last, but it is not the same city you left in your prime. The lagoon still glitters in morning light, gondoliers still sing as they ferry passengers across rippling canals, but beneath the surface you sense the rot of politics, debts, and change. The patrician families are tired, their wealth spread thin. Gambling houses still thrive, but the stakes feel lower, the thrill a bit forced, like an aging actor reciting the same lines too often. And then there's you, older, a little wearier, but still strutting in brocade when you can afford it. You find yourself drawn back into conversation circles, not for love or gambling, but for talk of ideas. The Enlightenment has fully bloomed, and the cafes echo with debates about reason, liberty, and whether kings should tremble at the thought of their own people. You lean forward, toss in your observations, enjoying the role of philosopher almost as much as lover. Mainstream historical fact: Venice in Casanova's later years was a hub of intellectual exchange, with cafes like Florian's buzzing with poets, scientists, and exiles. You take a sip of chocolate and join the fray. Still, you cannot resist a little theater. You puff yourself up as a man of letters, pointing to the manuscript pages you carry in a leather folder. These are your memoirs. or at least the early sketches. A quirky tidbit, you brag to acquaintances that your life is too vast to be contained in a single volume, as if you are the Homer of libertines. You joke that if you ever finished writing, no publisher could afford the ink. They laugh, but you are only half joking. In quieter moments, you find yourself strolling through the less glamorous alleys. The fishmongers dump salt water into the gutters, cats leap between windowsills, and the smell of brine mixes with frying oil. You remember a time when these very streets held adventure, an assignation in a dark doorway, a chase through carnival crowds, but now they hold memories more than promises. Historians still argue whether Casanova truly regretted his aging years or embraced them as a final stage of storytelling. You, in this telling, can feel both, regret for passions that no longer ignite so easily, and a certain relief that you are no longer enslaved to them. Yet, just when you think the stage is winding down, Venice pulls you back into intrigue. A nobleman approaches with a whisper. Perhaps you can still be useful as a negotiator, a messenger, even a spy. Your old skills, charm, quick wit, languages, are not so outdated after all. You relish the chance, though your legs ache more than before and you now calculate risks with more caution. The thrill is still there, but tempered, like wine left open overnight. At evening gatherings, you feel the tug of contradiction. One moment you are the jester, spinning stories of seductions and escapes. The next, you are the weary philosopher, urging young men to read Voltaire and avoid your mistakes. The room hushes when you speak, not because of your beauty, long gone, but because of your reputation. You are becoming your own legend, and legends do not need youth to survive. On nights when the moonlight glimmers across the lagoon, you retreat to your desk. The quill scratches across the page, and you write not for fame but for memory. You want to trap your own voice before it fades. You laugh at yourself, calling out your own exaggerations as you pen them, but you keep writing. Perhaps you sense that this, not love or gambling or intrigue, is the true legacy you'll leave, words, mischievous and confessional, like a wink across time. Venice is changing, and so are you. But for now, you still walk its bridges, still catch the eyes of strangers, still hold court in smoky cafes. You know you cannot halt the clock, but you can leave behind a story so loud it will echo longer than your footsteps on the stones. The lagoon seems softer now, as if the water itself is tired. You look at Venice with eyes that have seen every secret corner, every masked parade, every betrayal in candlelight. The bells of San Marco still ring, though they seem slower, heavier, as though the city itself is aging alongside you. You have long since accepted that your life is less about action now and more about narration, retelling, reshaping, reimagining the chaos of your youth into something that resembles a coherent story. You sit at your desk in a borrowed room, a stack of pages beside you. The ink stains your fingers, smudges onto your cuffs. You chuckle as you write lines that you know are embellishments. Perhaps you didn't leap from that balcony quite so gracefully. Perhaps that woman wasn't as enchanted as you claimed. But on paper, the details dance the way you want them to. Quirky tidbit. Casanova referred to his own memoirs as a lie in the service of truth, knowing full well that memory bends when it wants to entertain. You lean back, pleased with your phrasing, pleased that future readers, if they ever see these words, will imagine you larger than life. The world outside your window is not the Venice of your youth. French troops are on the march across Europe, and you hear whispers that Venice's independence, centuries old, will not last forever. Mainstream historical fact. In 1797, Napoleon's forces brought an end to the Venetian Republic, handing the city over to Austria. You sense the ground shifting, though you do not know the precise shape of history to come. All you know is that the carnival masks are slipping, and the city's long masquerade is ending. Historians still argue whether Casanova died content or bitter, whether he welcomed the quiet or resented the obscurity. You wander sometimes through the streets and notice children who do not recognize you. Once, your name could hush a room. Now, it is just another syllable in a crowded square. Yet you take comfort in that anonymity. You can buy bread without whispers following you. You can sit in the church pews without anyone guessing at the sins you once committed in the shadows. The city has moved on, but in your pages, it never will. The evenings are gentler. You sip chocolate, warm and thick, and let conversations wash over you like waves. No one demands you prove your cleverness anymore, they simply let you talk. You feel almost like a grandfather of scandal, tolerated and indulged, rather than feared or adored. That suits you fine. You know your body is failing. The joints ache, the lungs grow shallow, the mirror mocks you. But the quill still moves, scratching out your life, page after page. You tell yourself that this act of writing is your last romance. One more seduction, but this time of posterity. You court the future, hoping it will keep you company long after you are gone. And when you finally rest your head at night, the sounds of the city drift in. The gondoliers singing, the splash of oars, the faint laughter of lovers sneaking home before dawn. You smile, knowing you were once part of all of that. Perhaps you still are, in memory if not in flesh. You close your eyes and let Venice carry you one last time, as if the lagoon itself is whispering a lullaby. And so, as your story drifts to its close, you let the energy seep away, like candle wax cooling after the flame. You imagine yourself no longer as a restless figure darting from casino to carriage, but as a quiet silhouette at a desk, pages scattered, pen resting. The waters of Venice move more slowly in your mind now, as though time itself is easing into sleep. The crowds are gone, the carnival masks tucked away. All that remains is the sound of distant water against stone, steady, repetitive, a rhythm like breathing. It is a sound that tells you everything is still moving, still alive, even as you rest. The voices of the past, lovers, rivals, friends, fade into soft echoes, like a chorus half remembered in a dream. They do not trouble you. They simply remind you that you lived fully, perhaps too fully, and that is enough. You no longer need to prove yourself, no longer need to chase or conquer or persuade. The only task is to drift, gently, into quiet. You let your thoughts stretch out, sentences slowing, images lengthening, as though the city itself is rocking you like a cradle. The lagoon, the marble facades, the golden light across the domes, all of it softens, dissolves into haze. And at last, there is only calm. Calm in the rhythm of water. Calm in the turning of pages. Calm in the knowledge that your story, wild and tangled as it was, has been told. You sigh, the kind of sigh that releases the weight of years, and you let the final image linger, Venice at dusk, glowing faintly, fading gently into night.